Hello folks, we're here at Hampton Court Palace. Now these kind of buildings you don't often get access to film or to video, certainly not long form videos, but I thought I'd ask if I can, and they said I can film a little bit, so here we are inside one of only two of Henry VIII's palaces that are actually intact today. Many of the houses and castles owned by Henry, although he didn't live in many of these buildings, there were only two real palaces. The other one is St. James's Palace, which I hope to get to at some point, and that's currently the senior palace of the sovereign. And when ambassadors are from other countries admitted to the UK, they are admitted to the Court of St. James. Of Henry VIII's 6 wives, only one of them actually survived the marriage without execution, divorce or death from other causes. And this wife was Catherine Parr. And Henry married Catherine at Hampton Court Palace here in 1543. Hampton Court was considered a very modern place when it was first constructed. It possessed a 36,000 square foot kitchen. It had a toilet area that could seat 30 people. Had bowling greens and more than 60 acres of gardens that included tennis courts. The gardens also have the UK's oldest surviving hedge maze, which was actually designed in 1700. At its height, Hampton Court Palace employed around 600 people. This part is Georgian, by the way. The last person ever to live at Hampton Court Palace was King George II. When his son, George III, ascended to the throne, he actually never set foot inside the palace. And it went unused until Queen Victoria opened it to the public in 1838. In 1952, it achieved an honour of statutory protection. It became Grade 1 listed. And this fact is pretty interesting in the light of how the HBO miniseries John Adams used the palace to film Adams's reception by George III as America's first ambassador to Britain, even though George III never set foot in here at all. During the 2012 Summer Olympics, Hampton Court Palace was a venue for the road cycling time trial. And just outside in the gardens, they built thrones for the athletes who achieved medal positions. The first part of this video that we saw, the Great Hall, was actually a stage, and we know that William Shakespeare and his company, the King's Men, performed several of their plays for King James I. And in late 1603 and early 1604, between the 25th of December and 12th night, the night of the 5th of January, the company was brought here, housed here for 3 weeks, to provide entertainment for the Christmas celebrations. Hampton Court also installed a magnificent astronomical clock on the tower of the gatehouse, facing the inner court in 1540. The clock is 15 foot tall, has 3 separate copper dials, A lot of renovations have been done here over the years. You might think a lot of them are recent. But the first phase of renovation took place when Henry came into possession of the palace, because it was never his. It was built originally in 1514 for Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. And Cardinal Wolsey's failure to secure an annulment for Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, because of course he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, and the church were against the idea of annulment for a marriage. His failure led to what we now call English Reformation. But before Henry VIII took control of the palace, the cardinal gave it to him as a gift. But both Henry and later on King William III would go on to expand the palace. And the latter, William III, these are his chambers. He did his best to make it rival Versailles in France. The actual renovations made by Henry cost him, at the time, about 18 million. There's also a chapel here, the Chapel of the Royal Palace. And it's where Archbishop Cranmer handed Henry the list of accusations against his fifth wife, Catherine Howard. And unlike a lot of the accusations against a lot of Henry's wives, Catherine's indiscretions had some real weight to them. She had already paid people for their silence. Needless to say, Henry didn't take it well, had her imprisoned at another royal establishment, the Tower of London, and then she was executed on the 13th of February, 1542. So now in another Tudor part of the building, not too far from the toilets, not too far from the buggy area where you can leave your prams and strollers, because of course at Hampton Court there are no elevators or lifts. Everything is grade 1 listed. You can't put in a lift. Some of these buildings, if they do want to have access, they might say on the left hand side, use a small area and build another tower and clamp that tower onto the outside of a modern building. But as far as putting lifts inside, it's not the done thing. We're talking about the kitchens now. These are the kitchen areas, and it was one of the largest kitchens ever seen in this country. As I said, the kitchens were 36,000 square feet in that toilet area that held 30 people. To employ 600 people, of course, it's a phenomenally large building. Some of it is open to the public now. They do have events here. It is used as a filming location, but not always easy in a place like this, which is a listed, protected building. If you are going to film a period drama, to use candles, so they are forbidden from using any candles anywhere in Hampton Court Palace. So the external corridors and some of these slightly more modern buildings you can film in, but filming in the Tudor part of Hampton Court, you're not allowed candles, and it's quite difficult as well without lifts to get any form of filming equipment, dragging them along corridors. It's not easy. Filming equipment is so heavy these days. And it's next to the River Thames. It's a lovely, leafy location on the edge of London. The Hampton Court Flower Festival is here every year. You might know that Buckingham Palace, the Tower of London, Windsor Castle are all great royal attractions where royalty until quite recently lived, but Hampton Court hasn't been lived in by a monarch since the time of George III. Buckingham Palace became the major residence from then on. And it is a common misconception. We call it Henry VIII's palace, but it was actually commissioned by Henry's advisor, Thomas Wolsey, who celebrated becoming a cardinal. And it really is the best place to learn about Tudor history. These surviving kitchens, 6 enormous fireplaces inside, would have been a place for about 200 cooks to prepare huge all-day feasts for the king and his entourage. And it had the tennis courts, it had the bowling green, the jousting area, archery in these 60 acres of landscape gardens. The palace was really the closest thing that the Tudors had to a theme park. In the 1830s, Queen Victoria opened this to the public, so for nearly 200 years this has been open to the public. One early visitor was the artist Vincent van Gogh, who came to see the tapestries which I showed you earlier.